Mercedes matches a reported stolen vehicle!
You know those moments when your world flips upside down in an instant? When everything you thought was solid suddenly becomes fragile? This is one of those stories, and I promise you, by the time we reach the end, you'll never forget it. Picture this: Atlanta. Late evening? The city lights reflecting off the Chattahoochee River like shattered diamonds scattered across dark water. A woman is driving home in her own luxury SUV, a vehicle she worked decades to afford. Her name is Dr. Simone Carter, and in just a few hours, she's going to teach someone a lesson about assumptions that will echo through an entire city. But right now, in this moment, all she sees are flashing blue lights in her rearview mirror. And something deep inside her chest tightens. Not fear exactly, it's something else. It's awareness. The kind of awareness that comes from living too long in a world where your dignity can be questioned with the flick of a badge, where your success can be mistaken for a crime, where driving while black in an expensive car can make you a suspect before you even roll down your window. Dr. Simone Carter had made this drive 100 times, from the Fulton County Courthouse, where she served as a respected circuit judge, back to her home in Buckhead. Steady, focused, careful, always careful. But tonight, careful wouldn't be enough. The moment those lights erupted behind her, time seemed to slow down. She signaled. She slowed. She pulled over exactly as the law instructs, because she knew the law better than most. She'd spent her entire career interpreting it, enforcing it, believing in it. Before her window was even halfway down, Officer Marcus Bennett stormed up to her car like she'd just led police on a high-speed chase. His flashlight hit her face with a force just short of physical violence. No greeting, no explanation, just suspicion, thick and hostile. "Step out, now." Dr. Carter kept her voice calm, kept her hands visible, kept her composure even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Officer, may I ask why I'm being—" He cut her off, sharp, dismissive. "This Mercedes matches a reported stolen vehicle." Let that sink in for a moment. He hadn't even seen her license yet, hadn't run her plates, hadn't asked her a single question. He had already decided she was guilty. Guilty of driving while successful. Guilty of existing in a space he didn't think she belonged. The accusation hung in the cold night air like smoke. Despite the sting of humiliation burning through her chest, Dr. Carter stayed composed. She reached carefully for her registration, moving slowly, deliberately. The way you move when you know one wrong gesture could be misinterpreted as a threat. She handed it to him. And you know what he did? He grabbed it roughly, barely glanced at it, then crumpled the paper and tossed it onto the shoulder like it was garbage. Like her identity, her proof of ownership, her very existence held no weight at all. That moment, paper hitting pavement, would replay in his mind the next morning when he learned who she really was. Sergeant Linda Hayes arrived seconds later. Older, seasoned, expression carved out of stone. She assessed the scene quickly but offered no intervention. When Officer Bennett gave her a look that silently asked for confirmation, she nodded. It was the nod of someone who'd seen too much and questioned too little. The nod of complicity wrapped in experience. The conflict escalated fast. Bennett yanked Dr. Carter's door open, grabbed her wrist, and slammed her against the Mercedes with force that made her coat snag on the door handle. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't cry out. She'd spent years watching victims enter her courtroom after nights like this. She'd listened to their testimonies, seen their bruises, felt their humiliation through her bench. She refused to give him the satisfaction of fear. "Hands behind your back," he barked. "Officer," she said steadily, her voice carrying a strength that came from somewhere deeper than anger. "You need to verify my identity. I am Judge Simone Carter, Fulton County Circuit Court." His laugh was sharp, mocking, dismissive. "Right, and I'm the mayor." Sergeant Hayes smirked. "Just cuff her." While Bennett tightened the handcuffs, far tighter than protocol required, tight enough to cut into her skin, Another pair of eyes watched from a short distance away. Officer Daniel Rivera, still young, still believing that policing could be honorable, still hoping that the uniform meant something more than power. His dashcam was running, capturing every second. The wrongness of the moment pressed on him like a physical weight. He shifted, opened his mouth once, then closed it again. He didn't have the courage to stop it, but he couldn't look away either. And sometimes witnessing is the first step toward change. Minutes later, dispatch crackled through the radio with information that should have ended everything right there. The Mercedes was clean, registered to Dr. Simone Carter. No stolen report, no flags, nothing that justified the stop, the suspicion, the arrest. Officer Bennett heard it. Sergeant Hayes heard it. Officer Rivera heard it. Dr. Carter heard it loudest of all. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? You'd think they'd apologize, uncuff her, maybe feel a little embarrassed. But Bennett's jaw just flexed in irritation. Not relief, not embarrassment. Irritation. "We're bringing her in anyway," he muttered. His pride wouldn't allow retreat, and Sergeant Hayes didn't question him. Officer Rivera looked down at his boots, sick with the knowledge that something irreversible was happening, but still too afraid to intervene. Dr. Carter sat in the back seat of the cruiser, the cuffs cutting into her skin, her breath fogging the plexiglass that separated her from freedom. But she wasn't defeated. She wasn't broken. She was thinking quietly, strategically, cataloging every detail with the precision of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms. His tone, her injuries, the audio on his supposedly malfunctioning body camera. Officer Rivera's silence. Sergeant Hayes' compliance. Bennett believed she was powerless because her wrists were bound. He had no idea. He had just arrested the judge presiding over his own misconduct case. And he had even less idea what seeing her in that robe the next morning would do to him. The booking room at the Northside Precinct smelled of stale coffee and old paperwork, the kind of place where time doesn't move so much as hover. Stagnant and thick. Judge Simone Carter stood quietly as an officer inventoried her belongings. Her phone, her keys, her slim leather briefcase. Each item sealed away like pieces of a life temporarily suspended. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. The handcuffs had been removed, but the pressure remained at her wrists, faint red marks that carried more truth than any report Bennett would write that night. The holding cell door clanged open and she stepped inside. Concrete walls, a metal bench, a flickering light overhead. A woman sat curled on the opposite end of the bench, intoxicated, muttering to herself between hiccups and tears. Every few minutes, she'd lift her head to complain about being stopped for no damn reason near Peachtree Street. Dr. Carter listened, offering a gentle nod, but said little. She knew better than to speak recklessly in a precinct where every word could be twisted into a threat or a confession. Still, she was far from silent on the inside. Thoughts moved quickly, assembling themselves with the precision of someone used to thinking under pressure. She began cataloging everything from the moment Bennett pulled her over, the tone of his voice, the force he used, Sergeant Hayes' approving nod, the sound of her registration hitting the pavement, the brief glance of moral conflict in Officer Rivera's eyes. Rivera might not have stepped in, but he had seen everything. And sometimes witnessing carries more weight than intervening. Sometimes all it takes is one person who can't forget what they saw. The drunk woman on the bench fell into a deeper sleep, snoring softly. Dr. Carter allowed herself a long exhale. She hadn't felt fear, not the kind that shakes your bones, but she felt a different kind of heaviness. Not for herself. For the reality that this scene was common, almost expected for people who looked like her. A judge by day, reduced to a suspect at night. The duality wasn't new, but it stung just the same. A young officer escorted her to a wall phone for her one call. He kept his gaze low, as if embarrassed by the situation, as if he knew something was deeply wrong but couldn't find the words to say it. Dr. Carter dialed her home. Michael answered on the second ring. "Simone, where are you? Are you hurt?" His voice cracked through the static, and she could hear the panic rising in it, The fear of a husband who knew his wife had left the courthouse hours ago and should have been home by now. "I'm fine," she said calmly, keeping her voice steady even though she could feel emotion threatening to crack through. "Don't come here. Don't call anyone. Just meet me at the courthouse at 8:30 in the morning." "Should I call a lawyer? Should I—" "No." Her tone was firm, almost sharp. "Trust me, everything will make sense soon." A long silence followed, but Michael finally whispered, "I trust you. I love you." "I love you too," she said, then hung up before emotion weakened her resolve. Back in the cell, Dr. Carter sat upright, back against the wall, eyes closed but mind awake. She could feel the hours creeping by, but she refused to let them wear her down. Every detail from tonight would matter. Every misstep Bennett made. Every word spoken. Every moment Rivera hesitated. She replayed each piece with the same focus she used when reviewing evidence before a major trial. Across the city, in a dimly lit office far quieter than the precinct, Officer Daniel Rivera stared at his tablet. The dashcam footage from the stop played again and again. He watched Bennett's aggression, Hayes' complicity, Dr. Carter's calm, and he watched himself, silent, motionless. Standing a few steps behind the line he knew he should have crossed. Shame washed over him, but something stronger followed. Conviction. His father's words echoed in his mind, words spoken the day Rivera graduated from the academy. "Be the man who protects, not the one who looks away." With hands trembling slightly, Rivera uploaded the footage to the Internal Affairs anonymous drop portal. He typed a short note, just enough to direct attention without exposing his identity. Possible misconduct. River Road Stop, 23:40 hours. Review urgently. Detective Carmen Rodriguez was known for her instincts. The moment the file hit her inbox, something about the timestamp caught her eye. She opened the video expecting another routine complaint, but when the spotlight hit Dr. Simone Carter's face on the recording, Rodriguez froze. She paused the footage, zoomed in, and felt her stomach tighten. She had testified in Carter's courtroom once. There was no mistaking her. Rodriguez replayed the clip from the beginning, jaw tightening with every second. She recognized not only misconduct, but a pattern. Something bigger, something deeply rooted. And the fact that the victim was a sitting judge meant the situation was explosive. She locked her office door, picked up her phone, and began making calls up the chain of command. Protocol could wait. Truth couldn't. Back in the holding cell, Dr. Carter opened her eyes, sensing Dawn's slow approach, even without a window. She flexed her fingers to restore warmth. She was tired, but not defeated. In her mind, she could already see the courtroom, the bench, the case file she'd reviewed just hours before her arrest. The name on it, Marcus Bennett, seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. She knew what the morning would bring, and she knew Bennett would never see it coming. The desk sergeant on the day shift barely looked up when the cell door opened. His tone was flat, routine, detached from the weight of the night Dr. Carter had just lived through. "You're released pending review. Sign here." He slid a clipboard toward her without meeting her eyes. To him, she was just another name, another case moving down the conveyor belt of a system, too used to being unquestioned. Dr. Carter signed, collected her belongings, and stepped outside into the early Atlanta morning, where the air carried that particular southern humidity even in the cooler months. For the first time in hours, she inhaled freely. Her wrist still throbbed, the skin tender, but the pain grounded her. It reminded her of why she would not shrink from what was coming. The impound lot sat behind the precinct, a fenced-in graveyard of cars waiting for their owners. Her Mercedes was parked in the far corner. She approached slowly, noting the scuff along the passenger door where Bennett's grip had slammed her into the metal. A small dent, a silent witness. She traced her fingers across the cold surface, letting the moment settle. Not as victimization, but as evidence. The engine hummed smoothly when she started the car. The familiarity brought her back into herself. She eased onto the quiet street, navigating toward home. Commuters were beginning to fill the expressways, headlights stretching like rivers of weary determination. She blended into the flow, just another person in a city that had no idea what had happened to her or what was about to unfold because of it. Michael was waiting at the front door when she pulled into their driveway. His face, usually measured, patient, carried a storm of emotion. Relief, worry, anger, and disbelief all stacked together. He stepped outside before she made it halfway up the walk. "Simone." His voice cracked slightly. "Talk to me. What did they do?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she placed a hand briefly on his cheek, calming him with the resilience that had carried her through the night. "I'm home," she said softly. "Let me shower, then I'll explain." Inside, she peeled off clothes that still smelled faintly of concrete and fluorescent lighting. The hot water stung her wrists, reddening the bruises, but she stood under the stream until her breathing found its rhythm again. When she finally wrapped herself in a towel, she felt restored. Not healed, but centered. Her judicial robe lay neatly folded on a chair in the bedroom, exactly where she'd left it the day before. The black fabric seemed heavier than usual, but it steadied her. She lifted it carefully, letting the weight settle across her forearms like a reminder of purpose. The robe wasn't just authority, it was responsibility earned through decades of discipline and an unyielding sense of justice. When she came downstairs wearing a charcoal gray dress and holding the robe draped over her arm, Michael stared at her, trying to decipher her expression. He slid a cup of coffee toward her. "Just tell me one thing. Are you okay?" "I'm angry," she admitted, "but I'm okay. And I know exactly what needs to happen next." He sat across from her, worry tightening his mouth. "We should file a civil rights suit immediately. This is beyond outrageous." She shook her head. "No, not today." "Simone." "Last night wasn't random." Her voice stayed calm, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. "There's a reason Officer Marcus Bennett felt so comfortable acting the way he did. There's a reason Sergeant Hayes backed him without question. The problem is bigger than one stop, bigger than one precinct." Her husband leaned back, studying her. "You already had a case involving him, didn't you?" She nodded. "I reviewed it yesterday afternoon. Isaiah Thompson, 17. Excessive force. I'm presiding over his case at 9 this morning." Understanding dawned across Michael's face. "And Bennett doesn't know that." "No," she said quietly. "But he will." She sipped her coffee, gathering her thoughts. What she hadn't told Michael yet was how the pieces were aligning. She'd seen enough patterns in her courtroom to recognize one when it appeared. Bennett's behavior, Hayes's complicity, the silence of officers who knew better. None of it was isolated. She suspected internal affairs would pick up the trail soon, especially if someone from the scene had a conscience strong enough to act. The image of Officer Rivera flickered in her mind, nervous, conflicted eyes darting as if battling something inside himself. She hoped he had taken the step she believed he might. She set her mug down and rose from the table. "I need to get to the courthouse early." Michael reached for her hand. "You're walking into a storm." "I know," she said gently. "But storms break things open. Sometimes that's the only way the truth gets air." The drive downtown felt different than usual. Dr. Carter could feel the robe lying across the passenger seat, a quiet reminder of how much could shift within a handful of hours. When she pulled into the judge's reserved lot, she took a long breath, gathering strength for the day ahead. She walked through the side entrance, avoiding the main atrium intentionally. The courthouse lobby held too many eyes, too many questions she wasn't ready to answer. Inside her chambers, she locked the door and sat at her desk. The case file for State of Georgia versus Marcus Bennett was still open where she'd left it. She reread the details of the arrest of Isaiah Thompson, tracing the pattern: escalation without cause, disproportionate force, inconsistent reporting. It mirrored what she'd lived the night before with almost eerie precision. Her fingers rested lightly on the folder's edge. This wasn't coincidence. This was pattern. This was structure. This was a man who behaved the same way every time he thought no one important was watching. A knock on her door broke the silence. It was her bailiff. "Judge Carter, courtroom's prepped whenever you're ready. Parties have begun to arrive." "Thank you," she replied. She stood slowly, lifting her robe from the chair and slipping it over her shoulders with ceremonial care. The fabric settled like armor, drawing a clear line between the humiliation of the night before and the authority of the morning now rising around her. When she looked at herself in the small mirror hanging near the door, she saw no trace of the woman handcuffed on River Road. She saw resolve, control, judgment, and something deeper, clarity. She picked up her gavel, feeling the familiar weight anchor her. It was time. The courthouse hallway buzzed with the low murmur of attorneys, clerks, and officers waiting for their cases to be called. But none of that noise reached Judge Simone Carter as she stood behind the closed door to Courtroom 5A. She inhaled once, slow and steady, letting the robe settle across her shoulders. The courtroom beyond that door was familiar territory, her territory, but today carried a weight unlike any other day in her career. She placed her hand on the handle, felt the cold metal against her palm, and pushed. The bailiff's voice carried through the room the moment she stepped inside. "All rise." The shift was immediate. Lawyers straightened, the gallery quieted, and Officer Marcus Bennett, sitting at the defense table, began to rise without looking up from the notes he was shuffling. He had no idea. Not yet. Dr. Carter ascended the 3 wooden steps to the bench, moving with the same composed authority she brought to every proceeding. Only when she reached her seat did Bennett finally look up. The moment his eyes found her, everything inside him seemed to collapse at once. He blinked once, twice, then stared, frozen, pale, breath caught in his throat. His chair scraped loudly against the floor as he staggered back into it, the color draining from his face like water from a broken glass. His attorney, Robert Walsh, put a steadying hand on his arm, whispering sharply for him to pull himself together. But Bennett's gaze was glued to the bench, to the woman whose wrists he had bruised only hours before. Dr. Carter met his stare for half a second, calm, unwavering, before shifting her attention to the docket. She refused to let the past night show on her face. This moment wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth. "Good morning," she said. "This court is now in session." Her voice held the room in an instant. Even the attorneys who knew nothing of the night before felt something electric humming beneath the surface. The assistant district attorney, a sharp young prosecutor named Rachel Chen, approached the podium. She greeted the judge respectfully, though a flicker of confusion passed across her features. She couldn't understand why the defense attorney looked like he was sitting next to a man on the verge of physical collapse. "Your Honor," Rachel began, "the state is prepared to proceed in the matter of the People versus Officer Marcus Bennett." Before she continued, Dr. Carter held up a hand. "Before we begin, I need to place a disclosure on the record." Walsh stiffened. He already sensed trouble, but nothing could prepare him for what came next. "Last night," Dr. Carter said, her tone firm but neutral, "I was detained and arrested by Officer Bennett during a traffic stop on River Road. I was released early this morning without charges." A wave of shock surged through the gallery. Gasps, whispers, attorneys exchanging startled glances. A reporter who had slipped in early for another case fumbled for a notebook. Bennett buried his face in his hands. Walsh rose quickly. "Your Honor, with the fullest respect, this creates an inescapable conflict of interest. We must move for recusal." Dr. Carter's gaze cut to him, steady but not hostile. "I understand your concern, counselor, but the law requires I disclose any interaction. Not that I remove myself automatically. I have reviewed the statutes and ethics opinions. I am confident that I can preside fairly." Your Honor. Your objection is noted, she said, voice firm. We will proceed. Walsh sank back into his chair, knowing he had no legal leverage to force her off the case at this stage. Bennett looked as though he might be sick. Rachel Chen cleared her throat, visibly thrown off balance but regaining composure. Your Honor, the state intends to show a pattern of excessive force by the defendant. The victim, Isaiah Thompson, will testify that Officer Bennett escalated a non-threatening situation into a violent confrontation without cause. She cued the court clerk to play the body camera footage. Video filled the monitor, the teenage boy being yanked from a car, thrown to the pavement, crying out as Bennett pinned him with a knee. Gasps rippled through the gallery again. When the footage ended, Rachel continued, This was not a split-second decision. It was a pattern, one that cannot be explained by fear or confusion. Walsh stood for cross-examination. He spoke confidently at first, arguing officer safety, training, the unpredictable nature of nighttime stops. But Bennett, sweating, trembling, unable to look at the screen or at the bench, undermined every word Walsh tried to construct. Then the courtroom doors opened. Detective Carmen Rodriguez entered with measured steps, holding a sealed evidence envelope. She was not scheduled to appear. Heads turned as she walked directly to the prosecutor's table. Your Honor, Rachel said, with permission, the state would like to introduce newly submitted evidence from internal affairs. Dr. Carter nodded. Proceed. Rodriguez connected a USB drive to the system. The monitor lit up again, this time showing the dash cam footage from the night before. Dr. Carter's vehicle, the stop, Bennett's tone, his force, Hayes' approval, and beyond them, Officer Daniel Rivera standing rigid, witnessing every second. The gallery erupted louder than before. The parallels between the two cases were undeniable. Walsh stood, flustered. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Dr. Carter spoke over him. Internal affairs evidence relevant to pattern of conduct is admissible. I will allow it. Bennett covered his face again. His breathing was shallow, panicked. Rachel's voice took on a sharper edge. Your Honor, this footage demonstrates that Officer Bennett disregarded dispatch confirmation that the vehicle was not stolen. It also shows statements indicating explicit bias. She played the audio portion next. His words echoed through the courtroom. Matches the profile. Expensive car, late night, black driver. We both know how this works. No one made a sound. Even Walsh seemed stunned. Dr. Carter let the silence stretch long enough to let the weight of the truth settle. Then she looked directly at Bennett. Mr. Bennett, please rise. He struggled to his feet, shaking so visibly the bailiff stepped closer in case he collapsed. He couldn't meet her eyes. This court has reviewed the evidence, Dr. Carter said. Your conduct with Mr. Thompson and with me last night shows a consistent pattern of unjustified escalation and disregard for procedure. I find you guilty of excessive force. A collective exhale filled the room, but Dr. Carter wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am referring last night's incident to the district attorney and to federal authorities for review of possible civil rights violations under color of law. Bennett sagged, his knees nearly giving way. And Sergeant Hayes? Dr. Carter added, turning her attention to the gallery where Hayes sat rigid. Internal Affairs has been notified of your supervisory role. You will answer for your decisions as well. When she struck the gavel, the finality echoed like the closing of a vault. Bennett was still trembling, still unable to fully process how a woman he dismissed as insignificant hours earlier now stood above him in judgment. The robe he mocked was now the robe condemning him. Power had flipped, and this time the law was watching every second. The news broke before noon. By early afternoon, every major Atlanta outlet had pushed notifications to phones across the city. The headlines varied, but the shock was universal. Decorated police officer found guilty after unknowingly arresting judge presiding over his case. Reporters swarmed to the courthouse steps, cameras lined up shoulder to shoulder. Microphones pointed toward anyone who looked remotely connected. What had happened inside Courtroom 5A wasn't just a verdict. It was a rupture, one that sent tremors through the city's long, tangled relationship with policing. Outside, Police Chief Anderson spoke solemnly at a hastily arranged press briefing. "The department takes these findings seriously," he said, reading from a statement that had clearly been drafted under pressure. "An internal investigation is underway. Officer Bennett has been taken into custody pending further review." His eyes flickered toward the cameras, toward the growing crowd. He knew as well as anyone that this was bigger than a single officer. Bigger than one night, one stop. It was a reckoning long overdue. Meanwhile, inside her chambers, Judge Simone Carter sat quietly behind her desk. The courtroom roar had faded, replaced by the soft hum of the building's heating system and the distant echo of foot traffic. She rubbed a hand gently along her forearm, tracing the faint bruise that was already fading. The physical pain would go quickly, the memory wouldn't. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. Dr. Carter looked up as the door opened and Detective Carmen Rodriguez stepped in. She looked exhausted yet resolute, carrying a folder of preliminary findings. "Judge Carter," she said, her voice respectful but warm. "Internal Affairs is expanding the investigation. There are at least 10 prior cases linked to Bennett with similar patterns. We're talking systemic issues, supervisors clearing reports without proper review, indicators of bias and stops across the entire district." Dr. Carter absorbed the information with a slow breath. "Keep going," she said. "Don't let this disappear into bureaucracy." Rodriguez nodded. "We won't, and thank you for what you did today. It mattered." After she left, Dr. Carter leaned back, letting the weight of the morning settle. Justice wasn't clean or swift, but today it had found its footing. Later that week, at a city council meeting packed to the walls, residents from every corner of Atlanta spoke their truth. Community leaders demanded reforms. Mothers stood at the microphone holding photographs of their sons, stopped or arrested without cause. Lawyers brought data, pastors brought testimonies, and activists brought urgency. Dr. Carter didn't attend, judges rarely did, but she watched the broadcast from her living room beside Michael, seeing the momentum building in real time. The next morning, the police chief requested a private meeting. When he sat across from Dr. Carter in her office, he looked worn down, stripped of the usual bureaucratic armor. "Judge Carter," he began, "I want to offer a formal apology on behalf of the department." "Chief," she said, steady as ever, "apologies don't repair systems." He swallowed hard. "We know. That's why we're ready to make changes." Dr. Carter slid a typed list across the desk. Body camera enforcement reforms, third-party auditing, independent civilian oversight, transparent reporting of traffic stops, training requirements rooted not just in theory but accountability. He read it quietly, line by line. "Some of this will take months. Some will take council approval." "Then you better start now," she answered. He nodded, understanding this wasn't a negotiation. It was a directive. As word spread that reforms were moving forward, something else began to shift. Emails arrived from community members thanking her for what she endured. Letters came from judges in other districts, quietly acknowledging their support. Even a few officers wrote admitting they'd seen misconduct, but had never felt empowered to challenge it. Her experience had cracked something open. Fear, silence, complacency, and the light coming through was brighter than anyone expected. One afternoon, as she was leaving the courthouse, she spotted a familiar face near the steps. A young man with shy eyes and a nervous stance. Isaiah Thompson, the teenager whose case had brought Bennett into her courtroom in the first place. "Judge Carter?" he asked, stepping forward cautiously. She stopped, smiling. "Isaiah." How are you holding up? Better, he said. I wanted to thank you, not just for me, for everything. He paused, looking down briefly before meeting her eyes again. I'm thinking about majoring in criminal justice. Feels like maybe I could help fix something. Emotion brushed her chest. Quiet, steady, hopeful. We need people who understand what fairness actually looks like, she said. Call me when you start your applications. I'll write the strongest recommendation you've ever seen. He grinned, shoulders relaxing, then walked off toward the street with a lighter step. Only a few blocks away, another kind of transformation was unfolding. Officer Daniel Rivera sat outside the Internal Affairs office, an application in hand. He reread his answers, his father's words echoing in his mind. Be the man people can trust, not the one they fear. When the door opened and Rodriguez appeared, she motioned him inside with a subtle smile. You ready for this? She asked. I am, he said. And he meant it. Months passed. Policies changed. Training shifted. Officers were reassigned or disciplined. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the department began to feel different. Less closed, less defensive, more accountable. For Dr. Carter, life settled into a new rhythm. Her courtroom remained firm, fair, uncompromising. But there was something new in her voice now. An added depth, a resonance built from surviving the very injustice she spent her life confronting. On an evening quiet enough to hear the wind moving through the trees outside their home, Michael sat beside her on the couch and asked, Do you ever wish it hadn't happened? She thought for a moment, fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. I wish the world didn't allow it to happen, but I don't regret standing in it. Not for a second. He nodded, taking her hand. Atlanta continued to move forward, imperfectly, unevenly, but forward. And the echoes of that night on River Road lingered as both warning and promise. Justice, once awakened, doesn't go back to sleep. In the end, the story of Judge Simone Carter stands as one of those rare moments when a single night exposes a lifetime of systemic cracks. What began as a routine drive home along River Road became the spark that pulled an entire city into a long overdue conversation about power, prejudice, and accountability. Dr. Carter's journey, from being slammed against her own vehicle to presiding over the trial of the very officer who profiled her, revealed a truth that resonates far beyond Atlanta. Justice is fragile, but it is not powerless. Her humiliating arrest could have easily been swept aside, justified under vague language like officer safety or suspicious behavior, just as countless others had been. But Dr. Carter refused to let silence do the work of oppression. She did not break. She did not lash out. Instead, she observed, remembered, and prepared. That quiet strength, what many people mistake for passivity, became the force that shifted the balance. The next morning, when she stepped into courtroom 5A wearing the robe Bennett mocked the night before, she didn't seek revenge. She sought truth, and that made all the difference. Officer Bennett's collapse under the weight of his own actions was not the climax. It was simply the consequence. The true heart of the story lived in the ripple effect, the young officer, Daniel Rivera, who finally chose integrity over fear. Detective Rodriguez, who saw past the badge and followed the evidence without hesitation. A police chief who, for once, could no longer look away. And a teenager named Isaiah Thompson, who decided that instead of giving up on the system, he would grow up determined to fix it. And then there was the city, its residents, its activists, its families, who used Dr. Carter's experience as a catalyst to demand something better. Reform didn't come from speeches, but from exposure. Change didn't come from anger alone, but from truth that could no longer be ignored. Dr. Carter didn't ask to become the symbol of this movement, but she embraced the responsibility with grace. She showed what leadership looks like when it is rooted not in ego, but in service. She reminded the public that justice is not a ceremony. It is a daily act of courage performed by real people who choose accountability, even when it's uncomfortable. If there is a lesson to take from her story, it's this. Courage is rarely loud. Most of the time, courage looks like staying calm when you have every reason not to. It looks like standing up for yourself without raising your voice. It looks like refusing to let fear dictate your choices. Think about it. Dr. Carter could have screamed. She could have fought back physically. She could have let anger consume her in that moment, when her registration hit the pavement, when the handcuffs cut into her skin, when she sat alone in that cold cell. But she chose something more powerful. She chose clarity, because she understood something that many of us forget in moments of crisis. The most powerful weapon against injustice isn't rage, it's truth, documented and undeniable. We see injustice every day, in workplaces, online, within institutions, even among friends. And each of us has the ability to respond the way Dr. Carter did, with clarity, dignity, and conviction. You don't need a robe to stand for what's right. You just need enough courage to take one step in that direction. Maybe that means speaking up when someone is treated unfairly. Maybe it means challenging outdated policies in your workplace. Maybe it's supporting someone too afraid to speak for themselves. Maybe it's simply refusing to look away when you see something wrong. Change doesn't require authority, it requires humanity. And here's what I want you to understand. Every single person who played a role in this story, Dr. Carter, Officer Rivera, Detective Rodriguez, even young Isaiah Thompson, they were all ordinary people facing an extraordinary choice. Dr. Carter didn't have superpowers. She had fear, just like anyone would. But she chose not to let fear be the loudest voice in the room. Officer Rivera didn't storm in to save the day. He struggled, he hesitated, but eventually his conscience won. And that footage he uploaded became the crack in the wall that brought everything else down. Detective Rodriguez could have buried the case, written it off as complicated, or let politics slow things down. But she chose to follow the truth wherever it led, even when it led straight into the heart of her own department's failings. And Isaiah, a 17-year-old kid who could have been broken by what happened to him, instead decided to become part of the solution. These are the kinds of heroes we need. Not the ones in movies who never doubt themselves, but the ones who feel afraid and do the right thing anyway. That's real courage. Dr. Carter's story reminds us that silence protects the wrong people. Truth protects the right ones. Every time we stay quiet when we should speak, every time we look away when we should witness, every time we accept that's just how things are instead of asking, but why does it have to be this way? We're making a choice. And that choice has consequences. But here's the beautiful part. Every time we choose differently, we create a ripple. One person's courage gives someone else permission to be brave. One act of integrity makes the next one easier. One moment of truth changes the temperature of an entire room. Dr. Carter didn't change Atlanta by herself. She sparked something. And then other people, people like you, people like me, picked up that spark and carried it forward. That's how real change happens. Not in one dramatic moment, but in 1,000 small decisions made by ordinary people who decide they've had enough of looking away. So, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it. What injustice have you witnessed that you've been too afraid to challenge? What truth have you been too comfortable to speak? What change have you been waiting for someone else to start? Because here's what Dr. Carter's story teaches us. You might be that someone else. You might be the Officer Rivera who finally hits send on that report. You might be the Detective Rodriguez who decides the truth matters more than politics. You might be the Isaiah Thompson who turns pain into purpose. Or you might be the Dr. Carter who refuses to let one night of humiliation define you, who transforms injustice into a catalyst for change. The question isn't whether you have the power to make a difference. The question is whether you'll choose to use it. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, but I'm not a judge. I'm not in a position of authority. What can I really do? Let me tell you something. Dr. Carter's power didn't come from her robe. Her robe just made it visible. Her real power came from the same place yours does, from her refusal to accept injustice as inevitable, from her commitment to truth even when it was uncomfortable, from her willingness to stand firm in her dignity even when someone tried to strip it away. That power lives in you too. Every single day, you have opportunities to choose courage over comfort, truth over convenience, justice over the easy path. When your coworker makes a racist joke, you can laugh along, or you can create an uncomfortable silence that speaks volumes. When you see someone being treated unfairly, you can scroll past, or you can bear witness. When systems fail the people they're supposed to serve, you can shrug it off as just the way it is, or you can ask the harder question, how do we make it better? These moments don't feel significant when they're happening. They feel small, awkward, risky, but they add up. They create the world we live in, one choice at a time. Dr. Carter's story is powerful, not because it's unique, but because it's universal. The injustice she faced is the same injustice that plays out in different forms, in different places, every single day. The only difference is that she was in a position to do something about it in a very public, very undeniable way. But you're in a position to do something about it too. Your position, your way, your moment. And maybe your moment won't make headlines. Maybe there won't be cameras or reporters or dramatic courtroom scenes, but it will matter. To the person you stood up for, it will matter. To the system you challenged, it will matter. To the culture you refused to perpetuate, it will matter. And to you, to your sense of who you are and what you stand for, it will matter most of all. Because at the end of the day, we don't remember the times we played it safe. We remember the times we chose courage, the times we stood up, the times we spoke truth even when our voices shook. Those are the moments that define us. So as you go forward from here, carry Dr. Carter's story with you. Not as entertainment, not as something that happened to someone else, somewhere else. Carry it as a reminder that justice isn't something that just happens. It's something we create together through a million small acts of courage. A reminder that your voice matters, your witness matters, your choice to stand for what's right matters. A reminder that change doesn't start with someone else. It starts with you. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it stirred something inside you that says, this matters, this is important, this is the kind of truth we need more of, then I'm asking you to do something. Don't just let this moment pass. Subscribe to this channel. Share this story. Leave a comment about a time you witnessed injustice or found the courage to stand up for what's right. Because every time you engage, every time you share, every time you add your voice to the conversation, you're creating that ripple. You're saying, this matters, truth matters, justice matters. And when enough of us say that, when enough of us refuse to look away, when enough of us choose courage over comfort, that's when systems start to shake. That's when change becomes inevitable. Dr. Carter didn't change Atlanta alone. She needed Officer Rivera's conscience. She needed Detective Rodriguez's integrity. She needed Isaiah Thompson's hope. She needed a community that said, enough. And this conversation needs you. Your engagement helps us continue bringing stories like this to life. Stories that challenge the system. Stories that inspire courage. Stories that remind us of who we are and who we can be. So please, if you believe in stories that matter, if you believe in justice that's more than just a word, if you believe that change is possible when ordinary people make extraordinary choices, subscribe. Join this community. Be part of this conversation. Because the truth is, we're all Dr. Carter in some way. We're all facing moments where we have to choose between silence and truth, between comfort and courage, between accepting injustice and challenging it. And the world we create depends on which choice we make. So make the choice that matters. Make the choice that changes things. Make the choice that years from now, you'll be proud to remember. Stand up, speak out, bear witness. And together, let's create a world where justice isn't the exception. It's the expectation. A world where dignity is protected, not questioned. A world where the color of your skin doesn't determine how you're treated. A world where those who abuse power are held accountable by those who refuse to look away. That's the world Dr. Carter fought for on that bench. That's the world Officer Rivera chose when he uploaded that footage. That's the world Detective Rodriguez protected when she followed the evidence. That's the world Isaiah Thompson is building as he studies to join the fight for justice. And it's the world we can create together. One story, one choice, one moment of courage at a time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being the kind of person who believes that stories like this matter. Now go out there and be someone's Dr. Carter. Be someone's Officer Rivera. Be the person who refuses to look away. The world needs you, and justice is waiting.